Alright, so this is going to be part 4 to what if Asta had time magic. So with that being said, let's just roll the intro.
The bad bitch, like she average. I'm a savage, little hoe, what you want do? I'm about cash, if the raw fast, I'ma get that little nigga by any means.
Alright, so this series was on kind of a break because I just haven't been doing a lot of Black Clover what ifs. Just because, I don't know, I just wasn't in the mood, I guess. But yeah, I'm gonna start doing more Black Clover what ifs. I'm gonna do extra part to each kind of part that or series that I have out now. And yeah, I just don't do Black Clover what ifs as much as, you know, the Deku what ifs, because they tend to be a little bit longer in time, and I usually have to summarize more than in the Deku what ifs. So our story actually takes place after the dungeon, and I believe that Asta actually got a new weapon in this, that being the scythe, that has the kind of effects that I explained last time, where it has those, I believe, those 3 rings, and if they hit someone, they get kind of put back like 3 seconds where they were, kind of how the video game character Atlas works in Paladins, where he's able to rewind someone's time personally, and they go back a certain they go back more in distance than in time, if that makes sense. So if you were standing, you know, 5 feet away 5 seconds ago, then that's where you would be if you were to get hit by these kind of rings, I guess. So you guys also wanted Asta to have a time spirit, so that's what I'm also going to give him. So yeah, and someone in the comments asked, I believe, if Asta was able to see you know, when he like basically stopped time. And to answer that question, I believe that he would be able to, but he wouldn't really understand what would be happening, I guess. So our story actually begins a week after the kind of the dungeon, right? So in this one, Asta didn't get as hurt as he was in canon, so let's say he only sleeps for an entire day instead of the entire week that he normally does in canon. So in that kind of week span, he doesn't do much, just in canon. So we would get to the day where Yami would say that the Wizard King wanted to see both him and Asta and I believe as well as Noelle, but they don't take Luck along because he would want to start a fight, so they bring Charmy instead. So I'm not gonna really focus on her since she's not really relevant to the story, and she's only there really for mostly filler. So it would what would normally happen would be that Finral would basically take the Black Bulls to the city so that they can so Asta and Noelle can go and meet the Wizard King, just how they do in canon. I believe that's how it went down. And there they would, you know, look around the city for a bit, and then they would find the Golden Dawn. And this is where Klaus would basically apologize to Asta about how he was wrong about judging commoners, and that he would also ask him whether or not he was okay from the last battle, but he wasn't really too concerned because he wasn't as hurt as he was in canon. So they kind of make up for that scene, and Noelle and Mimosa still do that thing where they find out that they have feelings for Asta, and they're kind of freaking out about it. They continue to go to the kind of way to the castle, and this is where Klaus basically talks about how he doesn't really know this way around the castle because he's not you know, called up there that often. And this is where the Wizard King would come and show himself. This is when everyone would bow except for Asta, and this is when Klaus would basically force him to bow and tell him that's the Wizard King. And the Wizard King would take him to the tower to show for them to show him what they found in the dungeon. So Yuno would go first, and he would be amazed to see the kind of wind spirit with him. Yuno would then ask him if he could read the runes or the kind of characters on his kind of in his grimoire, but he would not be able to. Next would be Asta. The Wizard King would be really intrigued about Asta since they both have the same type of magic. Asta would show his grimoire to the Wizard King, but since he doesn't have as many spells, he would be a lot smaller, and he wouldn't need for it to basically be floating in the air, just how the Wizard King has it. So Asta would show him the new weapon that he got, and the Wizard King would be amazed. He'd be like, young Asta, this is a very, intriguing weapon. I've never seen anything like this. And this is when something activates within the kind of the scythe, right? And Asta doesn't really know what it is. And this is when the Wizard King's even more intrigued, and something comes out, and this is actually the time spirit. I'm not sure what it could be, what is it like physically, but we could say a lot of people wanted the name Chronos for the kind of time spirit, which makes sense since that is the Greek word for time, I believe. So we're gonna go with that, as well as Asta having it, obviously. But also, what do you guys want it to look like? Since time, there isn't too many kind of animals that are kind of represented with time, or even mythological creatures. But you guys can tell me down below what you want it to be. So the Wizard King would be, impressed that Asta was able to get this, spirit, right? And Asta would not know what it is. And this is when the Wizard King would basically ask him, Asta, do you know what this is? This is a very intriguing discovery. And Asta would be like, I have no clue. And everyone would be kind of shocked, right? So then the Wizard King would basically say, well, young man, I don't know how to tell you this, but you have the time spirit, just how has the wind spirit. And this is when everyone would be shocked to hear this. And this is when Asta would basically be like, you hear that, you're not gonna get a one up on me. I have a spirit as well. And this is when would basically fire back and say, well, there's still no way you're gonna beat me to become the Wizard King, right? And this is when the Wizard King would be like, oh, so you too want to become the Wizard King, is that right? And this is when Klaus would basically say, you shouldn't be so rude in front of the Wizard King. And this is when the Wizard King would basically say, no, it's all right, Klaus, but do you three know what it takes to become the Wizard King? And this is when Klaus would basically say, well, you need the trust and heart of the people. And this is when he would basically explain, the Wizard King that is, he would explain to Asta and that no, what really matters is results and things like that. And this basically gives the kind of speech, he basically gives the same speech that he does in canon to inspire both and Asta to do their best. So after this is done, the Wizard King invites them to the kind of the feast, just how he does in canon. Or before that, he invites them to see the kind of the Magic Knights get their kind of promotion. I think that's what it's called. But yeah, after that, he still invites them to the kind of lunch, or the feast. And this is where they kind of get into that confrontation between the kind of nobles of the Golden Dawn and Asta. So what would happen is that they would talk about Mimosa and how she was basically useless during the fight because she was the first one to get injured and basically taken out of the fight. This would then cause Leopold to basically say, if he was there, then there would be no reason to have any other squad there, since he is trying to boast basically the power of the Crimson Lions. So this is when the other Golden Dawn members would basically talk about as well, and basically say that even though he is a commoner, even though he's Golden Dawn, it's not like we expect much of him since he is still a commoner. And this is when they talk about this is when I believe Solid, which is Nozelle's younger brother, as well as Noelle's older brother, I believe. So he would basically say that, oh, we all know who the most useless one here is, and he would basically look at Noelle, as well as saying, why couldn't you die instead of our mother? And this is where he pours the water on her head, causing her to try to run away. This is when Asta would grab her hand and basically say, like, no, you shouldn't run away from people like this, right? And this is when she'd be shocked to kind of hear that. And this is when they would start berating Asta for being a commoner. But this is when, basically what would happen is that he would get on the table and basically say, like, why does it matter whether or not you're nobility? We're all magic knights, right? And when I become the Wizard King, that's all going to change. Everyone's going to be equal. And this is when Solid and the other magic knights there would kind of tell him to be quiet or tell him to shut up. And this is when the kind of sand mage, or at first it would be Solid, since he would be the first one to attack. And this is when he would shoot out kind of a water bullet, shooting it towards Asta. And this is when he would use chronostasis and basically capture the attack in a kind of sphere, just like you see on the screen, and basically reverse its trajectory and aim it back at the user, because we know that the Wizard King can do this. And also at the same time, time magic as him, as well as that same particular spell. This would cause it to kind of go back at the user, hitting almost hitting Solid, but he would be able to dodge it, or at least nullify the spell, just how Magna was able to do. So this is when the Sand Mage would basically come up to him and grab him using that kind of giant kind of golem, or that sand armor that is able to produce. This is when Asta would use his physical strength to basically get out of it, just how he does in canon, and as well as using his time cutter, I believe. Not using his scythe just yet. I forgot what I called the scythe, but I don't think I gave it a name, so you guys can tell me what the spell should be called. So he would use his time cutter to get out. Basically, if you don't remember how it works, it's not really that it's sharp. It's mostly that the kind of cutting line that it goes through basically ages to the point where it becomes kind of dust. So it wouldn't be too effective on the kind of sand, since it is kind of rock, right? And it ages pretty well since it's already kind of sand, but also would still be able to get through it since it is somewhat sharp. So this is when kind of the rest of the kind of mages there actually start to attack him, or about to attack him. And this is when this is when Leopold actually announces Asta as his rival, since he respects him because of Mimosa and what she said about him. So this is also when Nozel would basically be angry to the fact that a royal would call a commoner his rival, and basically talk about how the Crimson Lions are weaker because of it. This is when Fragolian would stand up for his squad, and basically both of them would release their magic pressure, and they would start kind of puffing up their chests against each other. But before they could do this any longer, this is when they find out that the city, or the capital, is actually getting attacked by the Midnight Sun. So the kind of stone mage there would bring up the map of the kind of kingdom and show where are the spots that are getting attacked. This is when Asta would basically say, what are we doing here? There's people dying out there. I'm going to go and help them, right? And this is when Leopold would also follow him. And after that, since there would be they wouldn't have any time to waste, this is when Fragolion would basically break up the groups into different, or they would break up the squads into different groups so that they could spread out and more effectively handle the situation. So Asta would basically be mowing down those kind of revived kind of zombies, because his time cutter would be able to cut through them pretty easily, since you know how the way I described it. So he'd be able to take out many of these pretty easily. And then this is when he would get to the source of the people producing the zombies, as well as him protecting that little girl, just how he does in canon. And he would find Rades there. Rades is the one with the kind of purple hair that summons, or not summons, that revives all the kind of those dead people. So this is when they would get into the fight. So Rades would summon his number 3, I believe, or number 4, I forgot. I don't remember the kind of names that they all went by. I know that one's Albert and one's Dave, I believe. And I think the first one is named John. So John would be the kind of first attacker. And this is when John would start shooting those kind of cursed bullets or cursed shots, I believe they're called. I'm not sure, but basically Asta would start using his sword to kind of slice and block him at the same time. But I believe they wouldn't really be able to hit him, since he does have time magic, which makes him the fastest, one of the fastest kind of magics in the kind of Black Clover world. So Asta would have no real trouble defeating someone like John, because he'd be able to shoot normal, like he wouldn't really need his grimoire for this. He would just shoot a beam of time magic, similar to what the Wizard King does, and this would basically erase, or not, it wouldn't erase him, but it basically aged John to the point of just becoming dust, right? And Rades would be very angry at this, right? He'd be like, how can someone like you, kill someone like John? It doesn't make sense, because he'd be judging Asta on his kind of height. And this is when Asta would basically be like, yeah, aren't I great? Basically he's kind of cocky, but not really too much. He still has that kind of Asta attitude, right? So he would basically be angry at at Rades for doing this, right? He's like, what's your motivation? How can you come and kill so many people, innocent people that have done nothing to you? And this is where he would kind of explain the kind of backstory, and Asta wouldn't have it, right? And this is when again Rades would raise another kind of one of his monsters, I guess. I don't know what you call him. One of his minions, I guess. And that being Albert, the one that can fly and shoot electricity. So Asta, again, would not have any difficulty with this, and he had no reason really to hold back, since he could basically one-shot most things. Time magic in the world of Black Clover is very overpowered, especially because it's a one-shot move if you get hit by it. Especially, I've said this in a couple of my other time videos, Asta, time magic, but Julius really can't lose to anyone in the series, right? At least like anyone normal, any like human. He only lost to Patri because he wasn't really trying to kill him. He was trying to capture him. But if he would have shot him at any point, he would have died instantly like that. But he didn't. So it's kind of weird how that works, but So Rades would come out, not Rades, Albert would come out and he'd shoot lightning all over the place. This is when Fogolion would be nearby and basically see the commotion. Not knowing really what the extent of Asta's time magic is, he would actually come to Asta and basically shoot Albert using his flame magic, basically burning it to a crisp and not really leaving anything behind. This is when Fogolion would basically say that I'm sorry for interrupting, but it looked like you were in trouble, right? And this is when he would explain his kind of philosophy about how you should basically be willing, or you should know when to give up and when not to, and things like that. Asta would say like, no, I didn't have any trouble, I was about to end them myself. And this is when Fergolion realizes that he has no scratch on him. And this is when Fergolion would say, "Oh, my apologies, but Asta, I'll let you know something very important. I consider you my rival, right?" And this is when Asta would, get that kind of respect from Fergolion because he's strong and willing to get stronger. Because Fergolion is that kind of person who basically wants people to get stronger and respects someone who does. So, as this is going down, the kind of rest would come, that being Noel and Leopold. This is when Rades would basically summon his number 4, that being Dave, I believe. And this is where he would basically distract them. And at the other point, I guess this is also when Rades would summon his number 1. That being, actually I don't remember his name, so we'll just call him his number 1, right? That person being the one that has that kind of defense spell, as well as that kind of I forgot what it's called, but it's like those spikes that he shot out. So this is when Asta would basically tell Fergolion that it's, he'll be able to handle this, and he would tell him to just watch. So that's what Fergolion does. This is when Asta would basically bring out his scythe, and he would take out those 3 rings off of the scythe and put him in front of him. And this is when the number 1 would start shooting at Asta with his kind of spikes, but none of them would really reach Asta. They would be kind of collected in these kind of 3 rings, kind of like his chronostasis, but a little bit different since they are kind of stationary, but he could also move them whenever he wants. So this is when, instead of shooting towards Asta even then, they just kind of get they go back in time, just how I described them before, and basically get redirected towards them, right? So this is towards Rades. So this is when Asta would basically rush towards the shield and use his scythe to basically crack through it, since it is a lot sharper than that of his time cutter. And he gives it a lot more reach, which gives him more leverage when he goes and strikes. So he'd be able to crack through the armor and slicing the number 1 in half. And it doesn't work the same way as the time cutter. It does use his energy, but it's not like it ages things up, really. So he'd be able to cut him, but it wouldn't really go to ash or anything like that. So this is when Fergolion would use his binding magic to bind up Rades. And this is also when Leopold and Noel would defeat his number 4, which I believe was named Dave, but I'm not too sure about that. So after this is when basically what would happen is that Rades' partner, I think it was Veto, I believe that's his name. So this is when Asta, he would notice that there would be a kind of like portal opening up, and basically this is the part where Fergolion would go through so that he can face the kind of Midnight Sun, the leader of the Midnight Sun, and that's when he gets ambushed and he actually ends up losing an arm. And this is when Asta would be even angrier because of it, and he would use his kind of time magic on Fergolion, that being the spell Time Heals All Wounds. I believe that's what the spell is called. And this actually regenerates, or basically makes his body go back in time to where he has his arm back. So after this, Asta's kind of drains of his magic somewhat, not having that much in reserve. So this is when Valtos basically opens up portals so that Rades can escape, but this is when Asta would try to stop him. basically throwing his kind of sword at the kind of portal, almost hitting what's his name? Rades, and almost cutting Voltos in the process as well, since Asta would start to discover or start using Ki, not unbeknownst to him, right? So he wouldn't really know that he's using Ki, but he would use it just how he does in the series. So this is when the kind of rest of the Midnight Sun would come and basically back up Voltos and Rades so that they could escape. And they see that Asta has time magic and they want to take him as well. Asta would want to use his kind of time magic to take out the kind of slime. And meanwhile, while this is all happening, the events of the events of all the other Magic Knight captains and the Magic Knights being outside the kingdom at the time because of Voltos still happens. So they would all have to use their kind of combination spells to kind of get to the capital as fast as they could, which would be right around the same time as the Midnight Sun coming. And when Asta tries to use this kind of beams of magic to destroy the kind of slime, it doesn't work as effectively because the slime just fills up the gaps that were basically nearly erased. So it's not like it's harder to use it on those kind of spells, those kind of liquid spells or gas, I would believe, since it is something I could just fill up. So Asta would be kind of drained of his magic because of the stuff that he used, including because of the fight from earlier. So it'd be easy for them to capture him and basically take him back to the hideout and try to do experiments on him, since he does have the same magic type as the Wizard King. So when they finally get back to their kind of camp or that kind of hideout, right, this is when the Wizard King would come through and basically instantly erase 2 of those members, those kind of nameless members, and then capture basically 5 or 4 of them in those kind of chronostasis. This is when Licht would appear and basically try to attack both Asta and the Wizard King. The Wizard King would only be able to basically hit his arm at that point using his time magic, but Licht would be able to take the more important characters from the Wizard King's kind of trap and escape with them. The Wizard King would tell Asta to get up and offer his hand to basically bring him up. This is when Asta would refuse it and basically stand up on his own, and the Wizard King would be proud of Asta being so strong, but then mention the part about the kind of the stone kind of tablet that's there and talk about the kind of stones that are there. Before they could talk any longer, this is when they go back to the kind of capital so they could check on Fergolion. Even though he was kind of healed with that, he is kind of he's basically out of stamina, I guess. So yeah, I'm gonna end it here, and then in the next part we'll go over the kind of fight against Patri in the Midnight Sun. But yeah, like I said before, I'm gonna try to do some kind of more Black Clover what ifs, and kind of do an extra part for each kind of series that I've done for Black Clover. But yeah, with that being said, this is gonna be the end of the video. So yeah,